Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Russian and Ukrainian delegations are meeting today for a third time since the Russian invasion was launched 12 days ago. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warned his people to expect more heavy bombing in cities as he took the international community to task for not doing more to stop Russia's deadly assault.
The audacity of the aggressor is a clear signal to the West that sanctions against Russia are not enough, because they didn't understand, did not feel, they did not see that the world is really determined to stop this war. You will not hide from this reality. You will not hide from new murders in Ukraine.
On Friday, Zelensky addressed U.S. lawmakers pleading for the creation of no-fly zone over Ukraine and harsher sanctions, including a ban on Russian oil and more military aid. The U.S. and NATO have rejected a no-fly zone, citing fears of further escalating the conflict with Russia. The U.S. and NATO are not directly involved in combat operations in Ukraine, but have delivered over 17,000 anti-tank weapons, including Javelin missiles, into Ukraine through bordering nations. The civilian death toll in Ukraine has topped 364, according to the UN, though the true toll could be much higher. Zelensky warned Sunday Russia is preparing to attack the key southwestern port city of Odessa, a city of 1 million. Russian missiles destroyed the international airport in the west-central city of Vinnytsia Sunday. Meanwhile, Human Rights Watch says Russia uses cluster bombs in its assault on Kharkiv last week, which could amount to a war crime. A U.S. official said Sunday Russia had fired 600 missiles since the start of the invasion and has committed 95% of its combat power inside Ukraine. The city of Mariupol is under siege by Russian forces, and attempts to evacuate trapped civilians repeatedly failed over the weekend. Russia said it was creating evacuation corridors for fleeing civilians, but Kyiv slammed the plan for forcing people to leave via Russia or Belarus. Thousands are also fleeing Zaporizhia, where Russian forces are now commanding operations at Europe's largest nuclear plant after seizing it Friday. The number of Ukrainian refugees has now topped 1.5 million. This is a mother who fled to Poland with her children but had to leave her husband behind in Ukraine.
Now I feel safe, but I'm very depressed because my family was divided by war in two parts, and I left my heart there in Ukraine.
Meanwhile, a group of prominent global civil rights lawyers filed a complaint with the UN on behalf of African refugees who face racist discrimination from authorities while trying to flee Ukraine. To see our interview with one of those refugees, you can go to democracynow.org. Back in Ukraine, residents of the Russian-occupied southern city of Kherson took to the streets Saturday to protest against Russian forces. Anti-war protests continued as well around the globe and in Russia. A local monitoring group says over 5,000 Russians were arrested by police across 69 Russian cities Sunday, bringing the total number of arrests to 13,000 since the start of the invasion. Meanwhile, Russia's crackdown on the press continues as Moscow passed a new law criminalizing reporting on the war and authorities blocking a number of independent online media outlets. Prominent independent newspaper Novaya Gazeta, whose editor, Dmitry Muratov, won the Nobel Peace Prize, said it was removing its reporting on the invasion because of censorship, but said it will continue to cover the war's effects on Russian society. Other news outlets, including CNN, ABC, CBS, Bloomberg, and BBC, also moved to limit their activity in Russia. Visa and MasterCard are also suspending operations in Russia. Meanwhile, a growing number of Russians are leaving the country, citing a fear of further crackdowns, including possible martial law and economic instability. In a direct address, the Ukrainian President Zelensky urged Russians to resist Putin's actions in Ukraine and at home.
Мы, украинцы, мы хотим мира.
We Ukrainians want peace. Citizens of Russia, for you, this is a struggle not only for peace in Ukraine. This is a fight for your country, for the best it had, for the freedom that you have seen, for the wealth that you have felt. If you keep silent now, only your poverty will speak for you later, and only repression will answer. Do not be silent.
Russian officials have confirmed the arrest last month of WNBA player Brittany Griner after authorities say they found vape cartridges containing cannabis oil in her luggage at an airport near Moscow. The charges Griner faces can carry a prison sentence of up to 10 years. Griner, who is African-American, is a two-time Olympic gold medalist and a seven-time WNBA All-Star. She's played for a Russian team for the past 7 years. Her wife, Cheryl Griner, said on social media they're fighting for Griner's release and return to the U.S. Over the weekend, the State Department issued a do-not-travel advisory to Russia and warned U.S. nationals the embassy in Moscow has limited power to assist citizens in Russia. In Washington, D.C., a federal appeals court has ordered the Biden administration to stop enforcing Title 42, the public health policy to expel asylum-seeking families with children back to countries where they face persecution or torture. The Biden administration is still allowed to use Title 42 to expel other asylum seekers without due process during the pandemic, but a three-judge panel questioned whether the policy, first invoked by former President Trump, is needed. In Mexico, a crime reporter was killed in the state of Zacatecas on Friday, becoming the country's seventh murdered journalist this year. Juan Carlos Muñoz worked for the outlet Testigo Minero and was a part-time taxi driver in order to make ends meet. Mexican journalists have been demanding the government of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador offer protection and end immunity for the ongoing spate of reporter killings. In occupied East Jerusalem, Israeli forces shot and killed a Palestinian teenager Sunday at one of the gates of the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. Local press identified the teen as 19-year-old Karim Jamal al-Khawazmi. He was at least the fourth Palestinian killed by Israeli forces in under a week. In Pakistan, the death toll from last Friday's bombing at a mosque in the northwestern city of Peshawar has risen to 56, with nearly 200 others wounded. The Islamic State's ISIS-K affiliate claimed responsibility for the attack on members of Pakistan's Shia Muslim minority. Hundreds of mourners joined the funeral prayers for the victims.
This is an insult to humanity. This is a disgrace to Islam. Those who have been martyred were humans. They were worshiping Allah inside the mosque, and they were killed brutally.
A top United Nations envoy is warning rival factions in Libya to agree to long-delayed elections after a parallel government claimed power in the northeastern city of Tobruk on Thursday. Stephanie Williams, the UN Special Advisor on Libya, called on the new eastern government to form a joint committee with its rivals in Libya's capital, Tripoli, dedicated to reaching consensus on a constitutional framework for elections. Libya abandoned plans for presidential and parliamentary elections in December, and Prime Minister Abdulhamid Dbeibeh has refused to cede power to an elected government. Aides to President Biden are discussing a possible visit to Saudi Arabia this spring to help repair relations and convince the kingdom to pump more oil. That's according to Axios, which reports the White House is scrambling to find new energy sources if the U.S. seeks to ban Russian oil imports. Minnesota Congressmember Ilhan Omar reacted on Twitter, writing, quote, "Our response to Putin's immoral war shouldn't be to strengthen our relationship with the Saudis, who are currently causing the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet in Yemen. Yemenis might not matter to some geopolitically, but their humanity should. This is a wildly immoral act," Ilhan Omar tweeted. Japan and South Korea say North Korea launched its 9th ballistic missile this year. Saturday's test comes just days ahead of South Korea's presidential election Wednesday. North Korea said the recent launches were part of tests to develop new reconnaissance satellite systems. Back in the U.S., New York City's ended a mask mandate for public schools and patrons of restaurants, bars, and other indoor venues, with no longer being required to show proof of vaccination. Mayor Eric Adams announced the steps Friday as daily coronavirus cases continued to fall far below record highs set in January, and after the CDC changed how it calculates the risk posed by the virus.
We are lifting the indoor mask requirements for DOE schools between K through 12 starting Monday, March 7th. And that is a great initiative. And I know there's some who state that they still want their children to wear their mask. You can.
Los Angeles also lifted its indoor mask mandate Friday. Meanwhile, a convoy of truckers opposed to pandemic public health measures has reached Washington, D.C., where they're planning a second consecutive day of protests, slowing down traffic on the Capitol Beltway. The U.S. Supreme Court's reinstated the death sentence of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, who's serving life in prison for his role in the deadly 2013 Boston Marathon bombing that killed 3 people and injured hundreds. The Biden administration's enforcing a moratorium on the federal death penalty, and Tsarnaev's execution is unlikely to happen anytime soon. In labor news, journalists at outlets owned by Geo Media, including Gizmodo, The Root, and Jezebel, who went on strike last week, have reached a tentative deal on a new union contract. The agreement includes higher salary minimums for all positions, a guaranteed annual 3% raise, trans-inclusive health care, 15-week parental leave, and investment in diversity efforts and transparency in how newsrooms are run. In Iowa, 7 people were killed, including 2 children, after at least 3 tornadoes swept through the state Saturday. Thunderstorms that triggered the tornadoes destroyed buildings, homes, and knocked down trees and power lines. And Vice President Kamala Harris joined civil rights leaders and activists in Selma, Alabama, Sunday to mark the 57th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, when state troopers violently attacked Black voting rights activists in Alabama as they attempted to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
In a moment of great uncertainty, those marchers pressed forward and they crossed. We must do the same. We must lock our arms and march forward. We will not let setbacks stop us. We know that honoring the legacy of those who marched then demands that we continue to push Congress to pass federal voting rights legislation.
Among those who spoke was the Bishop William Barber. Vice President Harris was joined on her trip to Alabama by 5 cabinet members. After addressing the crowd, Harris, civil rights icons, lawmakers, and others linked arms to march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report.